Hi, everyone, and welcome to the panel on breaches. We are here today with three of our vendors who have some really great insights about breaches, what happens, where they're going, what might be changing about them, and, well, all the other little details that help make us a little bit more secure. I'm Stacy Wright. I am the Director of Cyber Threat Intelligence for a company called Cyberwall. And I'm going to ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves really quickly before we get started, just so you know who you're listening to. Ashley, you're up first.
Thanks, Stacy. I'm Ashley Alaka. I am an intelligence analyst at Flashpoint, and my background is primarily in threats against the healthcare, financial, and retail sectors. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, thanks. It's great to be speaking to another analyst, I will say that. All right, Rebecca, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. So I am the Senior Director of Data Science and Domain Intelligence at DNS Filter. I've been in healthcare most of my career, so in multiple different ways. I've been on the hospital side, provider side, in insurance companies. I've worked at consulting firms that specialized in healthcare data and analytics. Currently, at my position at DNS Filter, we're kind of like a cybersecurity focused company. We specialize in blocking domain level threats from ever reaching your computer. And my team specifically focuses on leveraging industry knowledge, data science, and machine learning models to make the internet a safer place for our customers.
That's great. And it sounds like you have a lot of experience you're going to bring to use today.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Tom, you are up.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Thanks for having us. So my name is Tom Stanford. I'm the founder and CEO of Nivolo. We are the market leader in not IT SOAR, but OT SOAR, specifically focused around operational technology. And the two core markets we serve and lead are healthcare and life sciences, protecting medical facilities, laboratory devices on behalf of those vertical markets. So really excited to be here, Stacy, today. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And again, it sounds like you've got a lot of experience. This is going to be a great conversation. All right, so I'm going to get started with the questions. Ashley, you are up first with this one. So who is the bigger target of cyber attacks? The healthcare organization, the vendors they work with, or the patients themselves?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I know, like, within a lot of my research, the target kind of is based on the motivation of the threat actor. A lot of the times we see these targeted attacks against the healthcare industry and their affiliated entities. A lot of these actors are just financially motivated, and financially motivated actors tend to act more opportunistically. So I know I kind of said it kind of depends, but it's more just like who is the easiest entity to attack. So it's possible, and we do see this a lot, that threat actors will target healthcare organizations, whether it's the organization specifically, the vendor, maybe less so the patient in these types of attacks, but specifically in like ransomware attacks or where there's some sort of payment expected. These actors know that it's really critical, like life or death, to minimize downtime in a lot of these attacks. So there may be more of perhaps a better chance of them actually getting paid out to get data back or to decrypt these systems. So I was actually reading something recently. The FBI released this bulletin, this advisory about healthcare payment processors, which I found interesting. And sometimes these payment processors might be in-house, where it's just literally the person that's processing payments within your hospital, whatever your facility might be, or it might be a third party. And like I said, these actors tend to be financially motivated. And so of course they're going to go after these payment processors just because they're the ones signing off on any sort of changes you make to we need to send funds to this account or to this account or to this entity. So I guess it sort of depends on how you are leveraging that type of resource within your environment, whether that's a third party, whether that's in-house. So it does kind of depend, maybe we'll see patients targeted in more targeted attacks, where if someone's trying to participate in identity theft or steal someone's identity, we might see a patient targeted that way. Patients are often targeted, and same with healthcare employees, in social engineering attacks like phishing attacks to get someone to disclose sensitive information, whether that be login credentials, whether that be sensitive medical records. So it sort of just depends on, I suppose, where the threat actor thinks they can make the most money, and the resale value on the data that they could collect. And the only last point I'd want to say to that is specifically what we see a lot is the targeting of these third-party vendors that operate within that provide cloud services or VPN services. We see a lot of sale of access for that, just because these actors know that there could be just hordes and hordes of data stored there, and by targeting a healthcare entity, you could be accessing really sensitive information that could include healthcare records, that could include financial data. So it's sort of just, they're always going to be following the money, which is what I like to say a lot. So I would say it sort of depends on the ultimate goal of the actor.
That's a lot of information to unpack. Thank you. And I'm afraid I'm about to show my age when I sing out, "Show me the money," and a quote from a movie. Yeah, okay, at least a few of you got that one. All right. Rebecca, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what Ashley said. A target can be anyone with enough access to the data to get in there and get the information that the threat actor wants. And it's also more likely to be someone who has information that's publicly available. So like she was saying, the social engineering aspect that's becoming more and more prevalent really depends on having your email, your phone number, any information that that person can use to kind of trick you or phish you into releasing your information. So if you put on Facebook that you're remodeling your house, and then you get a bunch of phishing email attempts saying, "Hey, Home Depot gift card, click here," like anything that you put out there, they will use against you. They can use against you. And the other thing is the data that is stolen. So I know that Ashley mentioned it's usually for resale. I actually was reading the Healthcare and Cybersecurity Statistica 2021 dossier that they put out, and it has some numbers in there around the types of data that's stolen for resale. And it was like almost half of it is financial information of patients. And then from there, it's information from employee info, demographics, how to get a hold of them, their phone numbers, emails, and then patient information like that. And it's a much smaller percentage that's actually like that IP and business information. But the thing to kind of keep an eye on with when we talk about these types of things, so we always talk about the money that's involved, and Ashley touched on this, the real, maybe not, well, no, it is the bigger issue is the effect that these things have on patient care. So we need to always like kind of keep that in mind. There's a delay in treatment there, and worst case scenario, there could be like a loss of life caused by these ransomware attacks. And that's why breaches and attacks in healthcare have to be treated a little differently than in other industries, because there are lives on the line, and there is people's well-being and health that's on the line. And in other industries, the money or the data or whatever can be replaced, but in healthcare, the people can't.
Really good point. Thank you for ending with that too. Just, I can't tell you how many times people forget that it's the people that we are at risk of losing.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So Tom, I'm going to turn this one over to you. What steps can healthcare and pharma take to protect their users, data, and systems against modern cyber attacks?
Sure. No, thank you, Stacy. There's I think one of the biggest things that we face in the marketplace is a sense from our healthcare providers, and even to a larger degree from the life sciences community, sort of the overwhelming nature of medical device, facilities device, laboratory device cybersecurity. We have 30 years of history now in IT cybersecurity. We have significant layered sort of infrastructure in place, and then all the way at the other end of the spectrum is what we broadly define as sort of operational technology cybersecurity, and it is the Wild West, and there's a really tremendous sense of being sort of overwhelmed, by that. And one of the focuses we take sort of in the marketplace at Nuvolo is to try to keep things simple for the customer. And here's what I think is a tried and true plan. do you have a single system of inventory for all of your connected and non-connected, laboratory and scientific instruments, medical devices, and facilities devices? That is, everything good happens downstream of a single authoritative system of inventory existing in one place, and that you're confident in. Second thing is, do you understand, or do you have a standardized ingress and egress process for devices that come into your environment? One of the things we see in healthcare, especially over the last 20 years, growth has not come organically, it's come inorganically. There's been 1,000 mergers and acquisitions and consolidations in the healthcare space. And as a result, you have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 of everything. If you have 60 front doors to your house, and you make sure you don't lock all of them and the 60 back doors that you created, there's going to be more risk for the enterprise. So single system of inventory, single point of ingress, single point of egress for devices as they come into the environment. Those things can be simple achieved. I think the third thing, which is super important and requires a little bit more of a heavy lift, and you can do it all at once or you can do it over time, and that is a single common data model. And that is, do you refer to the modalities, the categories, the makes, models, and descriptions of your devices? Do you refer to them in the same way? And there's a very fundamental reason why that is important. You see now a burgeoning sort of ecosystem of new next generation OT discovery tools. I can passively listen, I can see these fingerprints now on the network. That capability is useless to our customers without integrity of the data, because it requires a match. I find a device that's acting in an anomalous way in my environment. The critical requirement I have is I have to go to a single system of inventory with a standard set of naming conventions and a standard data model to initiate a match so we can verify what the defective device is, and then begin the process of executing work sort of against that. So when we talk to our customers, we try to keep it really, really simple. Single trusted system of inventory, single common data model, and single taxonomy and naming conventions for those devices. To me, that is the foundation for any robust healthcare life sciences OT cybersecurity plan. And without those three things, I don't care how many millions of dollars that you spend, the program is not going to be successful. That's the engine and drivetrain, of the car. And I think it's something that customers also can execute on as a getting started strategy.
Great, thank you. And I couldn't agree more with our healthcare clients. We emphasize the same three things. So that's really great to hear. All right, Ashley, I know you wanted to jump in and add some more insight here. What would you add for steps healthcare and pharma can take to protect their users' data and systems?
Yeah, I think what Tom said was really great. We hear of like the Internet of Medical Things, I feel like, all the time. And it's like understanding the devices that are interconnected within your network. And I mean, it obviously expands out to like the people interacting with these devices, but understanding what's coming in and out of your network, what needs to be patched. Do you have a consistent patching cycle? How do you set a security baseline with these vendors that you're working with? So you can set your own security baseline internally with that. So it's really, understanding all of the moving parts that make up your network. And we always hear about like these security, in addition to these security baselines, these security steps that we can take, whether it's multi-factor authentication, whether it's, like I said, a consistent patching cycle, whether it's policy or role-based access to things, whether you've decided on some sort of network segmentation that works for you. You've identified certain data sets that should be stored in certain ways and can be, like I said, segmented from other ones. So it's taking this comprehensive approach, and it's not going to be a one size fits all type of security approach between any sort of healthcare network to the other. But I think it really starts with understanding exactly what you have within your network. And yeah, I think Tom like really nailed with it what he said. So I think, having a handle on what's coming in and out, employee training, I think is really helpful with that too, sort of having this like security awareness within your organization is really helpful. But right, I feel like there's going to be only more things added in and into these networks. So having a strong security baseline set to ingest those new devices, I think is really helpful.
Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that answer. All right, Rebecca, we are back to you with the long question.
Yeah.
With the proliferation of medical and IoT devices in hospitals, what challenges have you seen your customers encounter? What concerns do you have? What security challenges are being created and accelerated? And ongoing digital transformation across the healthcare and pharma industries?
Yeah, so I think we've kind of already touched on this. So the biggest challenges to cybersecurity in healthcare settings that I have seen kind of revolve around this multitude of front doors and back doors, right? Different ways to access data and platforms and cloud platforms and actual medical devices. And then on top of that, you have the multitude of people with different levels of training and understanding of cybersecurity and skill sets that have to access that data and that have access to what most people would consider highly confidential data, right? And there's a necessity for a lot of different types of people to have access to that data, because in a healthcare setting, I mean, especially if you're like in an ER or an emergent medicine, you need people to be able to find a full electronic medical record. You need people to be able to pull up an emergency contact right away. Like, all of this information needs to be at all of these people's fingertips, but those are all spreading the risk around exponentially, right? And it's something that we don't necessarily see in other industries at all. There isn't that necessity for everyone to have their hands on very confidential information in other industries. So, and the other thing that we kind of already touched on is like digital transformation is increasing the number of tools that people are using, and the like, for instance, charts. How many paper charts do we run into anymore? I mean, I do still see them. We did. I used to work in HEDIS, and we would do chart chases, and we would have to go to some providers still use paper charts, but it's almost obsolete at this point, where not that that was a better option in the past, but just it was more secure, right? So how things are transforming digitally are making everything a little bit less secure from a cybersecurity standpoint. And then you have to put all these different things in place to make sure that that data doesn't get out there and that the wrong people don't get to it. And the IoT devices, I mean, those are increasing exponentially as well. And now we have people who are going to those types of devices. Like, I've seen stuff with pacemakers and IV flow meters where you can access them, either hands-on access them or through Wi-Fi or digitally or with a wand, and you can change the settings on a pacemaker remotely. And those things have batteries that last, what, 20 years? So think of where we were 20 years ago from a cybersecurity standpoint, and those people are still depending on those devices to keep them alive. And there's no way to, I mean, not always a way to patch them. There's not always a way to bring them into the new age of technology and cybersecurity. So I think that it's this like widespread of different touch points for threat actors. Like, they have a plethora of places to attack healthcare companies. And I think with how quickly everything is transforming digitally, we're just trying to keep our hands around all of it. And to Tom's point earlier, like having that single consolidated list of where everything is and how it comes in and out of your organization is hugely important, because how will you know something's wrong if you don't have that list? The other thing that we see that's really interesting, and Ashley touched on it briefly, was the company that I work for, DNS Filter, gets all of our users' web traffic, and we can see what type of threatening sites they've gone to. And the number one thing, threatening site, that healthcare organization users go to are proxy and filter avoidance sites. So basically what that means, I see you're laughing because you understand this. So
Yes.
what that means is out of all of the threatening sites that people go to, 83% are proxy and filter avoidance at healthcare companies, which is 10 to 20% higher than what we see in other industries. So the people working in healthcare companies are actively trying to go around the security measures that we have put in place to keep data and people and information safe at higher levels than other industries. And the really important thing that I kind of get out of all of this is we have to remember that not all healthcare professionals are cybersecurity professionals, and they may not fully understand the implications of their actions or even understand cybersecurity at all. So education is really important there.
That reminds me of the quote, just enough knowledge to be dangerous.
Right.
Yeah. All right. And we are definitely on a pattern here because Tom, what would you add to Rebecca's answer?
Well, I'm taking just an adjacent to what Rebecca said for all the reasons that Rebecca mentioned. I think there's a changing mindset. So if we look at the enormity of what's like, and we described it in sort of 3 or 4 simple steps, like if you're a 3,000 bed hospital or 2,000 bed hospital and you've done 13 mergers and acquisitions over the last 10 years, getting to that simple place, that's a 18 to 24 months of focused effort plus hygiene plus ongoing. But so I think there's a significant shift sort of in mentality and in thinking with our healthcare customers, and I think it's based a lot on a lot of what Rebecca sort of talked about. The question is, how many fingers can we put in the dam, to prevent the or, and by the way, do we want to spend all of our time, all of our effort, all of our focus to do that? Or do we want to spend the majority of our time accepting the inevitable outcome that we are going to be breached? And then how do we be prepared in the event there's a single sort of anomalous event that takes place in the environment, and ensuring that we can address that through remediation or mitigation, and then not ensure that it proliferates to a system-wide thing. So I think where I think in IT security, it's all about keeping the bad guys out. That sort of old moat and wall sort of mentality, which is becoming increasingly difficult. I think from an OT perspective, and I would make the case that OT security is more important, and not that IT is less important, but you're talking about the physical plant in a healthcare environment, the medical devices themselves. You asked about this earlier. We're seeing situations today. By the way, the first medical device cybersecurity recorded death took place just a few weeks ago, as a result of a cybersecurity breach, which brought a set of devices down. One of the 3 patients that had to be transferred died in transit on the way to secondary hospital. So this is no longer supposition. It's no longer hyperbole. It's no longer any of those things. These are matters of life and death, now. And where we're seeing what I think the question was, what's sort of the trend, and what about the proliferation of all these IOMT devices? There is no way, even for those super mature healthcare customers that have essentially unlimited access to funds and resources. Think Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, the big, huge system, like, those systems that do extraordinarily well. Everybody else has to focus on, I think, preparation for when a anomalous event takes place. And it should be 80-20, because spending all the time trying to prevent one of those things from happening is going to be a fool's errand. Doesn't mean they don't have to make progress over time, but preparation is going to be critical, and that's the advice we're giving our customers. And I think some of that foundational stuff we talked about, it has less to do with cybersecurity than it does to do with organizational change management, process improvement, making sure what you have, basic sort of foundational stuff. I think our customers are having a easier time consuming that, as opposed to the traditional sort of they're often very, very intimidated by sort of the language and taxonomy and nomenclature around cybersecurity. So I hope that helps answer your question, Stacy.
Oh, Stacy, you're muted.
Stacy, you're muted. I'm sorry.
I had to do that. Sorry, somebody has to do it, right? So bingo cards, you got that one checked off. Okay, so Tom, I think that actually great answer. And you kind of went into my next question, which I'm heading towards you as well. What are some best practices to mitigate risk and protect healthcare employees and patients? And how do you go beyond visibility and operationalize that response?
Yeah. So, there's a whole host of things that are available to do now. And here's the advice and counsel we're giving to our customers. So we talked about those foundational things. I think that's part of the answer to the question. Operationalizing ingress and egress, single data model, common taxonomy, common set of location IDs, meaning, you think about just basic things, for example. Okay, we have a breach on a device. Where is the device? Like it sounds like sort of table stakes, basic requirements, but at the point where you have a device or a breach across a modality or an ecosystem of devices, that is not the time to try to find out where the devices are sort of in your environment. So it goes back to that sort of foundational things. But what else can we do? Technology and capability is available today to all healthcare customers to be able to orchestrate and automate a response to a cybersecurity breach. They've done it in IT. They call it IT SOAR. They've done that for it's a 15 or 20-year-old technology, very mature in this thing. Here are some critical differences, though. And I think about IT SOAR models. Part of the security orchestration automated response side on the IT side is enabled because I can remote connect to that device. I can ping the device. I can operationalize change on that device sitting in a security operations center, oftentimes unbeknownst to anyone else sort of in the environment. I mean, I can affect change remotely. What we hear from our customers is one of the principal cybersecurity threats to their medical and facilities device fleets is their IT department, meaning that there's genuine concern. You can't actively ping a chemotherapy delivery device. You can't actively monitor that device. And by the way, no IT professional should touch that device. That should be the work of a properly trained, properly certified clinical engineer, facilities engineer. And in some hospitals, we're starting to see these sort of cybersecurity CE overlays who understand the clinical engineering domain, but also have a good working knowledge of remediation and mitigation processes and best practices. We're starting to see that. It's early days in that process. So I think the nature of that is different. The critical thing we would suggest on top of those foundational requirements that we mentioned, sort of the 4 points, do you as a healthcare provider have the ability to orchestrate and automate? And what we mean by that is, can you get a high priority corrective maintenance work order to your ISO, to your internal clinical engineering team, or to the OEM in a timely and thoughtful manner with a prescribed, a work list, and specifically what we do. These attacks typically start with one device. They typically, and if they're left on their own, meaning if it goes undiscovered, if it goes unremediated, that's when really bad things can happen. So the advice and counsel we're giving to our customers, build that foundational things. Those are all practical things that any healthcare provider can do today. And on top of that, you work with the technology and the technologies that are available today to allow you to automate response, especially in a crisis, especially when you've had an anomaly. Those capabilities can be achieved today, not in years, but I would say in quarters, so take advantage of them, operationalize them, and focus on getting that one mitigation or that one remediation done so it does not proliferate and spread in the environment. And I think that's good, sound, practical advice, building on top of that sort of foundation that we talked about earlier.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Ashley, I saw you nodding along here, so I'm going to ask you, best practices to mitigate risk, to protect healthcare employees and patients? And how do you get into that visibility and operationalizing of a response?
Yeah, what Tom was saying, especially about automation, I think a lot all the time about how these threat actors that are trying to infiltrate systems, like that's their full-time job, right? Like they have so many, their greatest resource is time, and they're going to be targeting these entities no matter what. So automation especially is like key. And if you can automate some sort of response and save yourself time, and whether that's before or after the fact, you're taking away some tools from your adversary who all they have is time. Like this is fully their focus. And sort of like what Tom was saying before, we have these like baselines we can kind of set in terms of security and your response and how your operational continuation after some sort of cyber attack. And in a lot of our reporting, we do like to offer what we assess to be good mitigation techniques. But I had read something last year that really stuck with me. And it was in an interview with these two healthcare professionals. And they said that what they had found made such a big difference was creating a culture of security awareness. So it goes beyond this just employee training or whatever, which is certainly a key component of it. But making security a part of the culture, because it's integral to your work. And like we're saying in healthcare, it's integral to the health and potentially a life or death situation for patients. It goes so much further than just your couple hour security training. It's how do we prioritize security within our employees' day-to-day work? How do we familiarize them? And it starts with like, how do you identify a phishing email? But what if a device is acting in an anomalous way? That might not be just an accident. That could be signaling something greater. It is so integral, the security of these devices, of this information, just to keep these entities operational, that sort of seeping security into your culture has seemed so important. And when I read that, I was like, oh, like that was like a light bulb moment. Like, and obviously it's way easier said than done. And it is definitely going to require just a large amount of resources. But I think changing that mindset of security is integral in how we operate and how we serve our patients, how we serve our customers, how we interact with our vendors. I think that is a good starting block, a good foundation to set when you're trying to mitigate any sort of cyber threat, whether you're trying to preempt any sort of cyber threat, whether you're recovering from one. I just thought that was a very interesting way to frame the outlook on security in healthcare institutions.
That's great. And, it reminds me of something we say in my job, that yes, IT cybersecurity, we always talk about the fact that humans are our weakest link. But nowadays, there's a better one that I recently heard, and we've started using a lot, that humans are also the strongest defense, because a well-trained, strong cybersecurity culture can actually do a lot of good in preventing those. I also know that we've done some research, and I was talking with another cybersecurity summit panel where it looks like if you train folks a couple hours once a year, it's not nearly as effective as training them in short bursts throughout the year, keeping it fresh in their mind. So those are all really great points. Thank you both for that commentary. I'm going to switch tacks just a little bit and head this one back to you, Tom. A survey of medical device security asked 130 US hospitals whether cybersecurity was a priority in their IT spend. Only 11% put it as a high priority. More than 60% said they had other priorities. What do you think that is? And how can healthcare organizations be thinking about cybersecurity to change that around?
Yeah, and this is and I remember this question. I'm going to provide some really, really new data available to us. Here's what you see. there's a parsing taking place between IT spend and cybersecurity spend. They used to be sort of co-joined and sort of synonymous with one another. That is no longer the case, and we're seeing demonstrable data sort of around that. I was just I spent the last 2 days, at a cybersecurity sort of forum. It was really a content-rich environment. You're right. IT spend, first of all, it's going to be dramatically reduced in healthcare in 23 and probably in 24 as operationally most of these systems recover. You're seeing almost on a daily basis now $1 billion plus losses on a quarterly basis for the medium and large size systems. It's going to take some time for that to wash out of the systems. IT budgets will be coming down, projects will be pushed to the right. The exact opposite is happening for cybersecurity. These are board level, director level, board of trustees level sponsored initiatives. People are terrified, not only for their traditional IT security, but when people talk about ransomware, and I understand that, but at the end of the day, I believe this is about patient outcomes and brand, and those are huge factors. And staying out of the front page of the New York Times, I think those are all three. You guys will probably all get factors in some of these other reports. Like you're seeing now on a weekly basis these things, and I think it is really detrimental to brand. So there's a parsing going on, and I believe medical and facilities device cybersecurity, and this is what we're on the front lines. It will be highly prioritized, it will be top down, and it will be mandatory in 23 and 24 for customers to go through that foundation building process and start to operationalize tools. And that doesn't mean, by the way, putting a discovery tool in your environment and going from not knowing that you had a problem to knowing that you have a problem, right? It has to be more robust than that. There has to be an end-to-end capability. It can be basic and it can be foundational, but I disagree with the sentiment, because I'm parsing between IT spend and cybersecurity spend. I think those will be a priority, and I think the reasons for it are as plain as day. I view this, and I have a vested interest in this perspective, and I'll say that up front. But what we're hearing across the board is that addressing medical facilities and laboratory device cybersecurity is 1, 2, or 3 on every board's list. Think about, what's probably 1 and 2, the cost of staffing, operational overruns post-COVID, the ability to return to normalized, sort of elective procedures. Those are sort of 1, 2, and 3. But right after that is brand protection, revenue protection, patient protection, safety associated with OT device cybersecurity. I think it's going to be in the top 5 for every hospital.
That's really interesting. And personally, I'm kind of glad to hear that maybe it's creeping up that high, because I certainly remember my first days where it wasn't anywhere on the board agenda.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It is today.
Okay, great. So Rebecca, we're down to the last question. What challenges do you think healthcare organizations face when it comes to implementing cybersecurity fundamentals?
Yeah, I am going to go back to something that you said earlier, and I think really that it's the human factor, right? So the challenges that we see at DNS Filter personally are that healthcare employees are kind of behaving in a way that's a little bit different than what we see in other industries. And like I said before, they click on those proxy avoidance, filter avoidance things. So they're trying to circumvent the security processes that we have in place. The other thing that we see is that they are almost twice as likely as users from other industries to click on a phishing link, which is pretty concerning. Now, we can't say that they're clicking on links twice as often. It could also be that healthcare users are twice as targeted with phishing attacks. But just the fact that they are clicking on those links twice as often as any other industry that we kind of work with, and we work with all industries. We don't specialize in anything. We're just the internet, right? So it's concerning, and that suggests definitely that they are going to be phished more often, and that it is the human factor that is posing quite a bit of risk for healthcare companies. So what does that really tell us? I think Ashley said this already. Education is really important. Also, just as important is to cater that education to your audience. Like you were saying earlier, like little bits of information throughout the year is important. Also think about, how would you train an IT professional in cybersecurity versus how you're going to train a nurse's assistant or a nurse or a doctor in cybersecurity. Like those are very different types of people. And I would wager to say even very different ways of learning in general. So I think doctors are probably much more hands-on. IT professionals probably understand the concepts, and like, I think you really have to cater to the audience and figure out what works best and what actually gets them thinking about cybersecurity. And then back to the point earlier, cybersecurity as a culture, like how do you instill those things in doctors who don't necessarily, I mean, more and more they are dealing with it day to day, but that historically don't necessarily have to worry about cybersecurity. It's not something they ever would have thought about 20 years ago, right? Yeah. I think another thing that has already been brought up is that breaches will occur. It's not if, it's when, right? I think I looked at a study the other day that said 83% of healthcare cybersecurity professionals within healthcare companies have experienced some sort of breach. So to that end, it's important to have multiple layers of protection, and what we talked about already, automation of security and an incident response plan. And something that's not only just a paper written document incident response plan, but something that's well thought out, something you've talked about. What could happen? So is your incident response plan in your Google Drive online that might go down? Do you have a paper copy of it somewhere? Like simple things like that. You have to think through everything with these types of things. And then also practice. What are you going to do when this does occur? Because it will. Who are the remediation companies that you'll work with? Who will help you? Who will you reach out to? Do you have a contact there? Do you have cybersecurity insurance? Like, I mean, all of these things are really important, right? And it's not if, but when a breach is going to occur. And when that occurs, I think it's really important to be prepared and just practice your plan. Know what you're going to do before you need to actually act on it.
Really great advice. Thank you. And thank you for talking about testing it. You learn so many new little things when you test it.
I mean, we Q&A everything else, right?
We do.
We do. And we practice a lot of things. Anybody who starts a job follows behind and all that. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I know we are down to the last few seconds. Tom, 30 seconds, anything that healthcare organizations could do, one thing that they could do to make it better, what would it be?
Yeah, please don't be intimidated. Don't be overwhelmed. We'll help, but recognize that there are solutions, technology, best practices out there that can help you address this issue today. And no one's going to get to the Holy Grail, but for each of you as healthcare providers in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, you can establish the foundation, lower the overall risk profile of the healthcare organization. To Rebecca's point, not if you have a breach, but when you have a breach, you can be better prepared. Please don't be scared or intimidated. Work with us as business process partners, as technology partners, and we'll help you get to the other side.
Great. All right, Ashley, 30 seconds. What would you add?
Yeah, so healthcare is and will continue to be one of the most targeted and breached sectors. So prioritizing security into your operational environment, where it's just as much as you want to keep a device up to date, you have the newest technology, you need to keep it secure so it's working, whether that's your computer or it's some other sort of device. Just make sure security is a priority when you're upkeeping with your network environment.
Wonderful advice. Thank you. And all right, Rebecca, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go back to the human element of everything. So keep in mind that the consequences here are real, and use that to help educate and foster that security as a culture idea. It's a lot easier for people in healthcare to relate things back to healthcare. So if you're getting resistance, or if you don't know how to really push this forward, just remind people, if we do this wrong, the repercussions are real and people could die. And they will pay attention. They'll care. They do. That's why they do what they do. They will
That's
care.
exactly right. You're exactly right, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Yeah, really great points. Okay. Thank you all very much. This was a very enlightening discussion. I'm a little bit afraid to go to my doctor's office right now, but on the other hand, I'm sort of thinking I might bring my laptop with me the next time I go to my doctor's office, which they probably won't appreciate. So anyways, thank you very much for being here, for joining us today on this panel, giving some great advice. For all of you who did join us today and are listening to us, I hope this helped you. I hope this gave you some ideas about where you could start, or at least continue your process of moving from maybe a less mature format to a more mature, more repeatable way of doing things that will allow you to be more secure. With that, I will say, please remember that these three folks are here with vendors, so go check out their vendor booths in the vendor area, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks,
Thanks.
Ashley.